Hey everyone, how's it going? So this isn't a vlog that I normally do. Normally I kind of talk about gaming news and like what I think, but I never really would take a game and then say, well, they should do this. They should implement this for the sequel. And you know, this is what I kind of wanted to do with Mirror's Edge. Is I had this idea about talking with you guys about different stuff that they should include in the sequel and things that I think that they should add. And this is just something I think that needs to be brought to a lot of people's attentions. Mirror's Edge is one of those games that is it is really memorable to me in terms of just the experience I had with it, but also just in video game history in general. It's one of those games that when you look at, you don't really get a you don't really it doesn't really remind you of a game that you played before. It has a very distinct look and something that's original on all terms, in terms of graphical style and gameplay, and even so far as story. So it's just one of those games that is just 100% originality and something that's just new and different. And I wanted to talk about the sequel because it's been years. It's been almost 4 years now since the last Mirror's Edge, and there hasn't been any talk of really a sequel. I mean, they're planning on doing it, and then it kind of fell under the radar. So what I did is I wrote down some key elements as well as the beginning to how I think. This is something I wrote this down like 2:15 in the morning last night. I couldn't sleep, so I was like, alright, I'll just write this down since I was going to do this vlog today anyway. So I wrote down the beginning of how I think it should start and then how I think it should end as well. Alright. So, but I first want to start off by reading you guys the information on the Mirror's Edge 2 Wikipedia site. And the reason for that is because that'll kind of bring you guys up to speed on production of the game and why, it's we haven't heard anything about it for so long. So I'll leave a link in the description, alright, for the Wikipedia site, but here it is. It says, the production of a sequel to Mirror's Edge was confirmed by EA Games Europe Senior Vice President Patrick Soderlund in June 2009 interview with videogamesgamer.com, excuse me. In October 2008, the game's senior producer, Owen O'Brien, suggested that EA plans to turn the game into a trilogy by saying the story we're telling at the moment is kind of a trilogy, a 3-story arc. In February 2011, it was reported that development on Mirror's Edge 2 had been stopped after EA rejected a prototype submitted for a sequel. EA later clarified that they consider Mirror's Edge an important franchise, but otherwise had no further announcements. It has been confirmed by Frank Gubot that Mirror's Edge 2 will be built upon the Frostbite 2 engine, allowing for stunning physics effects and graphics. Alright, so, and that's it. We haven't heard, basically they stopped production in February 2011 for whatever reason. That could be because of profits, something happened with development, maybe it had something to do with Battlefield 3, that's a possibility, but there hasn't really been any we haven't heard anything about it since. And even E3 2012, I expected them to at least say, we're working on a Mirror's Edge 2 sequel. We don't know exactly when. It's not our, this game doesn't have our full attention, but we are still planning on doing the sequel. But we never got anything like that. There just hasn't been any talk. So, and it's not like Mirror's Edge didn't sell well. I think they sold around 1.2 million copies worldwide, and get this, 750,000 of those copies was actually U.S. sales. So the game was popular here in the U.S. and it sold decent. All right, that I wouldn't call that well, but it sold it sold well enough for there to be enough talk about a sequel. So. But here's stuff I wrote down. Don't worry, I'm going to go into detail and whatnot. So I wrote down this little story, the story little paragraph, kind of thing, just to set it up. So Mirror's Edge 2 continues a year after the first game. You return to the city as Faith Connors once again. She and her sister have been on the run from the CPF and the private military organization Parandel Kruger. With the runners on the verge of extinction, it is up to Faith, her sister Kate, Krieg, and Drake not only to survive the forest, but to uncover the dark secrets hidden from the city. Alright? So that's just something I wrote, like, before I actually put like a lot of thought into it. And when I actually wrote the beginning to the story, I kind of changed a little bit around as far as timing goes and characters and stuff like that. So, but that's just what I had in mind when I first thought about it. All right, so let's go over to key features. Um, Mirror's Edge was, well, what the developers did with the first game is that they created this beautiful environment, but then they restricted you from really exploring and really doing what you want to do. I think Mirror's Edge, which kept it from really just becoming fantastic and just amazing, was the fact that it was really linear, like way too linear for a game like that. When you looked around the city and you saw all these beautiful skyscrapers off into the distance, and you saw all these buildings, but you couldn't get to them. There was like no way to get to them. I mean, you'd always look. I mean, at least I would always look off into the distance and say, "Wow, this is that looks like a really cool place. I want to go over there," but I couldn't ever go over there. So I think the first thing they need to do with the sequel is they need to make it an open world game. Go wherever you want, explore whenever you want, open world game. Um, and even more so is that they would give you your objectives and say your objective is over there on this side of the city. All right, how you get there is your choice. You can get there from the rooftops. You can get there from taking the subway, from riding helicopters. You can get there from just going on the ground. How you get there is your choice. All right, you can go explore the city before you get there. It's just you can get there however you want. All right, so making it a huge open world. Explore a huge open world filled with plenty of verticality and strategic ways to approach your missions. That's what I wrote down. All right, so that's what I think they really need to do. I think that's the most important, to be honest, is making that game an open world, because not only is that going to add lots of playtime, but it's going to give people that feeling of, okay, I'm free, I'm on the rooftop, I can go over here, I can do whatever I want. You want to have that sense of openness that Mirror's Edge looked like it had, but really didn't. All right. And before I continue, I forgot to mention, for those of you who really don't think I have any place talking about this sequel to Mirror's Edge, let me just tell you my history. I've been really hyped. I was really hyped for Mirror's Edge from the moment they announced it, just because it was so different. And when I finally got my hands on the game, I played it. I really enjoyed it, but I kept going back to it, and incidentally, I set the world record for the flight level. And back when Mirror's Edge had like an actual site, instead of it being ea.com/Mirror's Edge as it is now, it actually was mirrorsedge.com. They actually, I remember when I set that world record, I went online to their site and I saw my online name posted right there on the front page as to the scoreboard and everything like that, the leaderboards, and it was like #1. I didn't really, it wasn't like I had an intention to beat it. I kind of was playing it, and then my message popped up on the screen, "You are the new world record holder." I was like, "What, really?" So I was really surprised. And then after that, I went on to set it 3 more times through various different levels in the time trial stages. So I am a 4-time world record holder in Mirror's Edge. I tried to go back and actually set it for a 5th time to really put some time in there, but I think EA shut down the servers. So whenever I try to go into the time trial stages, it keeps saying stuff like, "We can't connect you to the servers," and I had to play offline or whatever, but like that. But yeah, I set the world record 4 times in the time trial stages. So it's not like I'm just some guy who played the game and I'm like, "Oh well, they should include this." I spent a considerably large amount of time in there, and mastered pretty much the game. So but yeah, like I said before, explore the huge open world. Second is traveling in different ways. Now, with this open world, you don't want to say, "Okay, well, there's a far building over there I need to get to, but now I have to go all the way around the city to get to that building." Here's something about travel. All right, travel in a variety of different ways. Jump on buildings, like normally. Ride on top of subways. So like in that subway level in the original Mirror's Edge, imagine if you can just, at any point you see a subway passing, you jump on it, and all of a sudden you can just ride the subway to the point where it stops, or you can just jump off at any point you want. So that's the second way. Hang from a helicopter. Now, at the end of the first level in Mirror's Edge, when you're being chased and you have nowhere to go, right? You jump on top of that first helicopter and you see her hanging, and then she just drops down and she's able to get away. But imagine as you see you're running across the building, and you see a helicopter, all right, coming through. Imagine you jumping on that moving helicopter and actually holding on to the rods. As the helicopter's flying, to its destination or whatever. So you're hanging from the helicopter as it's flying, and all of a sudden, when you want to get to that building, you can just let go, and you can, drop and make sure you can't, you're not going to be dropping from like 50 feet and just act like you're fine. You drop from a good point. But imagine that, like just jump on a moving helicopter, you're hanging there, and then you just drop whenever you can. So, but that's a cool way. Or just explore the streets. You can actually, instead of climbing on the buildings, or jumping from the buildings, you can actually go down to the street level, and you can actually run down where all the civilians are, where all the cars are, and stuff like that. Now, the one thing that would kind of be the as far as street travel, the one thing I'm kind of thinking as a way to because it's not going to be like a runner, because the city, with all the propaganda that the CPF and the whole city has against the runners, not everyone's just going to look at a runner and just not react. So the whole city, the whole crowd and everything, they'll all be scared of the runners. They'll all back away. They'll be frightened because of all the propaganda they heard about them. So when you're down on the street levels, people are going to be looking at you. You're going to be more in danger, So you kind of for if they're going to actually implement that ability to go ahead and on the streets and stuff like that, you'd have to make the AI react to the player in a very shocked and frightened way. All right, but also you'd be more of a threat. Like more cops would be able to get to your location faster. It's just you're safer on the rooftops. That's the point. Alright, now here's a new gameplay thing that I think would be really helpful, because not only is it going to add to that sense of immersion, it'll make travel a lot more faster and quicker in terms of pace, alright? Experience the Edge Grappler, alright? Now that's just a name I just made up. I think I have a new name for it in the story, alright? So let me look for that really quick. I call it the Edge Hook, alright? The Edge Hook. What that is, it's kind of like this thing, on Assassin's Creed, you have that little arm thing that's actually the blade, but instead of the blade, get this, it's a hook, and you can just jump off of any building you want to, alright? And as you're flying down, you can use this hook to grapple to the edge of a building, and that would swing you, kind of like in Batman, but not as, kind of, not kind of like in that sense, but it would swing you, so you actually would grapple onto the building, and then all of a sudden, you'd be running on the side of the building while while your hook is grappled onto the edge of the building. So you're running on the side of the building, and then you just keep jumping, keep grappling to the other side of the buildings and whatnot. And that would also, imagine that, because that'd be pretty cool. You just jump off a building. Oh no, you're falling to your death. All of a sudden, you use this grapple thing. It grapples to the edge of this other building. And all of a sudden you're running on the side of the building. You're kind of like running like that. On the glass. I think that'd be a really cool way if they can actually implement that. So yeah, which allows you to use a hook blade to hook to the side of a building and either swing or run along the side of the building that you're hooked in. All right, so that would be a really cool feature as well. So definitely be cool if they include that. Next thing is, a lot of people had trouble with this in the first game, but improved hand-to-hand melee combat with, and get this, improved hand-to-hand melee combat with over 25 disarm animations and melee combos to take down your enemies fast, or even use them as human shields. A lot of times when you get into the actual hand-to-hand combat of Mirror's Edge, a lot of people complain about this, that it didn't feel right. It kind of is just you pressing a button, she just does the same thing over and over again. And and those disarm animations, like some of them took a long time to get used to. Even today, I could disarm basically any weapon without the use of slow motion, except the assault rifles. The assault rifles, I had really trouble trying to just disarm them without the use of slow motion. So you have to make the hand-to-hand melee combat a lot more fluent, a lot more just easier to pull off. So instead of just doing her left, right, double punch that she normally did, she would actually maybe use the environment, or there'd be like a cool, hand-to-hand sequence, or maybe even like a quick time event. It could be like you engage in a melee combat, right, and all of a sudden like R1 right trigger or whatever would pop up on the screen. You press that, and then she'd do like another punch, and then you press that, and something like that. But just improve it so that it's fluid, it's seamless, it doesn't feel clunky. That it's a seamless transition from running up to the guard, doing hand-to-hand melee combat, and disarm mechanics is another thing because, for example, like instead of having to run up to a guard, you stand there while your guard does this with his pistol, and then all of a sudden you press it, and then you do this arm mechanic. You can just run up and do it at any moment, at any time. I think that would be a lot better, a lot less clunky, and just because it kind of felt weird. You'd run up to a guard, you stand there while he actually do his animation, and then you finally would disarm him. Instead of doing that, you just run up, you just press the triangle or Y button, and then she'll automatically disarm the guard. So. But just that needs to be improved, definitely for a sequel. Seamless hand-to-hand melee combat and disarm mechanics in the game. All right, next up is deeper storyline with tons of backstory and an emotional impact. A lot of games try to do this. To name a couple, let's say, I know Prototype 2 was one. I mean, I didn't play it, but a lot. Based on everyone, all the reviews and that everyone I know who's played it, they all said, well, the game sets you up with this, kind of emotional storyline, but it kind of drops out. A lot of games, they do that. They set you up, they say, oh, well, look, this guy is a father, and he's fighting, and he's trying to look for his family. A good one is I Am Alive. I Am Alive, which had an excellent opportunity for a story, a deep emotional story that failed miserably on it. And a lot of these games do that. They start with a deep emotional story, and then they just drop it like it's like nothing. So we need this emotional storyline in there, all right? The type of connection that a lot of people, a lot of games, refuse to really elaborate on, all right? So we need that emotional impact, because that emotional impact will then drive players to further play the game and do it for a good cause, or even a bad cause, depending. So, but that backstory too, because we got quite a backstory in Mirror's Edge with the whole riots that were happening in the past. We need actual flashbacks. All right, we need full-on flashbacks of how Faith met Mercury, and how, because in Mirror's Edge, they just kind of said, well, they kind of showed a cutscene, of her breaking into his apartment, and he offered to train her. But we actually need, as the player, we need to actually play through that, because that will also strengthen the emotional impact. But it will really feel like the player is part of that backstory. That it's not just this black and white told story. The player needs to feel part of the story in every single way possible. So that needs to be included. Find out what happened to Faith's family. Now, we already know that her mother died in the riots, and that her sister, was saved. And I have more for. I'm going to elaborate more on what happened really, as an idea of what happened really later on when I discuss the story, right? But we really need to find out. We really need to be a part of that riot, that whole riot sequence when they're showing it. We, as a player, again, we need to be a part of that. So. And create a relationship with the characters, again, that's kind of like what I mentioned with the emotional impact, right? But we need to know more about Faith as a character, and then have that emotional impact relationship, with characters. So that needs to be included. Extra stuff to do outside of the main story, all right? 25 side missions with a variety of either delivery, combat, or stalking. What I mean by that is, let's say, there was one game that had that feature, Infamous, for example. In Infamous, remember when the guy, or one of the NPCs would say, I saw this guy, he's carrying a weird package, and you'd have to get up above, like on one of the balconies or the buildings, and then you would follow the guy to the actual destination, and you would pick up the package that he left behind. We need to. That's what I mean by stalking. Some missions like that, would be really cool, and combat like breaking and entering or something like that, or just maybe some NPC has vital information on something. I mean, I don't know, but you know, delivery is another good thing. Of course, the runners, they're couriers. Someone gives you a package, you go return it. That's a good side mission. That just strengthens, you know, experience or whatnot. So, but yeah, stuff like that. Um, brush up your skills with challenges like racing with Krieg, for instance. Like this is another good side mission. In Assassin's Creed, for instance, you'd always have these people that would be standing on rooftops, and you go talk to them, and they'd be like, "I can beat your time in like any race that you want to do," and then you know there'd be like a full on race, you know, between you and him. Something like that would be really cool to implement within Mirror's Edge. So you know, hopefully side missions like that would be really, really, really cool. So hopefully they can implement that. All right. Yeah, top-notch graphics built on an updated version of DICE's Frostbite 2 engine. Now we already, like I said in the wiki, they already said it's going to be built on the Frostbite 2 engine. That's going to be helpful. Now, that's what I wrote about the single-player option. I didn't actually write down the multiplayer options. I think I did once, and then I just threw the paper away, and I kind of started over, you know, but I'm going to talk about the multiplayer after I tell you guys about the story that I wrote and how I think they should end it and begin it. Because the multiplayer is just as important because it's going to keep people coming back to the game if they, for whatever reason, you know, didn't want to play through the campaign again. All right, but I wrote the beginning to the story, and I wrote the ending to the story. All right. But there's a huge gap, you know. It's just kind of like this is how they should open it, and this is how they should end it. Kind of they're just ideas, all right. But let's start off. And like I said, from the last paragraph I mentioned, I kind of changed a couple things up. So, Mirror's Edge 2 picks up 3 months after the end of the first game. Faith has trained her sister Kate to become a runner. They have been on the run for some time now from the local Blues and Paradelo Cougar units. The runners are on the brink of corruption with only Drake, Krieg, Kate, and Faith as the last remaining survivors. The story starts off with a flashback of Faith training her sister. The player will be able to familiarize themselves with the controls of the game as well as test out some cool gadgets. At the end of the training session, it opens up to Faith and Kate looking out to the sunset. Or the sunrise, I should name that, because it'll be early in the morning when the story actually starts. So they're looking out as the sun's rising at like whatever time it is. They both talk for a little bit, and Faith is interrupted by Drake, who tells her she needs to meet Krieg for a handoff. Meaning, you know, when the first mission, for instance, in the original Mirror's Edge, where you would have to get to the communications tower, you meet Celeste, you pass her the bag, and she'd go on from there. That's kind of what Krieg is doing, although you know, he has to meet you and basically give you the bag. All right, so that's what I mentioned. Faith then travels to Krieg. Once she meets with him, Krieg says to watch out for Blues because there is some unusual, you know, police activity in the area, some unusual danger that's just not going right. All right. As the player is traveling to the next destination, Celeste tackles Faith while she is running through a building. Now, as far as what I said, open world, but you also have to make it so that you can go anywhere. So what I imagined is that as you're, you know, as you have the bag and as you're running to the destination, you would break in through a building. Let's say there'd be like a glass window, and you break into the building. So you're running through the building as there's people working, there's cubicles and whatnot, there's papers flying everywhere, and all of a sudden, as you're running, Celeste out of nowhere comes and tackles you, and basically tackles you out the window. So you're falling out the window, you fall into the next building, you know, that's the next building that's across from the building that you were running through, all right? Let's see. Okay. Celeste states that she is here to take whatever is in the bag. Faith refuses, and the player is introduced to the hand-to-hand combat melee sequence. Now, this will also familiarize the player more with hand-to-hand combat, you know, sequences and stuff like that. So, you know, she tackles her. She says, "Give me what's in the bag." Faith says, "No way." If I, okay. Faith refuses. Okay, I already said that. Trying to find out where it was. Okay, once Faith stuns Celeste, a CPF helicopter arrives at the scene, forcing the player to run away, being chased by both an armed helicopter and Celeste. All right. Once the player arrives at the destination, what I mean, all right, so what I was thinking more is that they get to a chase sequence, or all right, I already mentioned that, right? So what I mean by destination is not the actual destination. It's just like your particular goal is to get to this area. That's what I mean by destination. So once a player arrives at the destination, this triggers a seamless cutscene. You need seamless cutscenes, all right? And a lot of people are gonna, some fans are gonna be disappointed about this, but I think it needs to be done because a lot of people didn't really see the point of this. The cutscenes that were graphic novels, the art that they use for the cutscenes, it needs to be dropped. All right, what I think you guys need to do is you need to put what's the word I'm looking for? Um, Pre-rendered cutscenes. You need to put pre-rendered cutscenes in the game, all right, but make them seamless cutscenes so that when it engages, it's kind of like with Max Payne 3, how it was seamless, how during the cutscene it would just go from cutscene directly to gameplay, seamless, no black screen, whatever. That's what I think you guys need to do, and I know it may be hard, with the graphics in this open world environment, but it will be necessary for creating a really well told story. All right, so let's drop the art for pre-rendered cutscenes, like beautiful pre-rendered cutscenes. All right. Um, all right. So this triggers a seamless cutscene where the player has nowhere left to go but to jump. All right. She's on the edge of a building. A helicopter is right in front of her. Celeste is running back her. She jumps. All right. You have to jump. Faith then jumps off the building and uses her edge hook to grapple on another building and swing into the window. So the building directly across from, she jumps off, she uses the grapple, and as she's swinging towards the glass, she breaks through it and is now inside the building across from where she jumped off from. All right. The player must then drop off the package at the destination where without being seen, of course, well, as trying to attract as little attention as possible. All right. Once the player arrives at the destination, Faith hands over the bag, and in it is a portable hard drive. Faith demands to know what's on it, but then is told to report back to HQ immediately, the headquarters immediately. So she's trying to find out information as to what's on the hard drive because, you know, Celeste and whatever the CPF they really wanted that package. So she wants to know what she's basically got herself into. Krieg interrupts her and says she needs her to be back at the headquarters immediately. So she has to leave, and basically, Faith, curious to know what's on the hard drive. Once she arrives, at headquarters, she asks Drake, and the answer he gives is not completely satisfying, but he replies stating that it could give them vital intel on the CPF and the PK, Parendel Kruger, right? So that's what I have for the beginning of the story. It's gonna start off as kind of calm, really kind of delving into backstory. I mean, I can't imagine them continuing it where the last one left off because you're just looking off into the building. How are you gonna kind of continue that? It's gonna continue sometime after the events of the first game. So, but that's what I have for the beginning. All right, now let's talk about the ending. All right, and what I think is that during the course from this beginning all the way to the ending, the whole goal is to basically win the city over. The people, and everything like that. Basically, you have to notify them that, they're not as bad. The runners aren't as bad as they seem. That it's just been false propaganda. So you have to win the city over, and that can be done by doing side missions, by just doing the main missions in the games. You have to. What you try to do is unite the city, the people of the city together, and then overthrow the government. All right, overthrow the political party or whatever that's controlling the city. That is the main goal here. All right, is to basically take this city that's controlled, that's always being surveillanced, just that has no freedom whatsoever, and then set the city free. Like have the people people be able to do whatever they want, and not feel like they're always being watched. Just set the city free from surveillance and just utter complete control. All right, so now here's the ending. All right, at the end, Faith and the runners have convinced the public that they are not the enemy and that the propaganda the CPF and PK were publicizing was not true. The runners then unite the public and turn them against the CPF and PK, and this causes the city to erupt into war. Very similar, but even more violent than what happened to the riots 18 years ago. From the story. All right. This is far more violent. This is a far more violent war than the riots that took place 18 years ago. Players will be able to be in the middle of the fight, so players will actually, there will be missions where you'll actually be in the middle of the fight, where you're on the streets, there's blood, there's fire, there's just people dying, and there's all this stuff that's happening. So you'll actually be able to be there down in the fight, but that won't be, the whole course of the game, all right? Fight and engage hostile forces, but the main goal is to get to the communications building. Well, I kind of changed that. Is to get to the communications facility. Now, as we all know, at the end of the first Mirror's Edge, where you're on top of the Shard, which is the tallest building in the city, it's completely made of glass. When you can even on the first mission, you could kind of see the Shard, and it was just you could see that it was just complete glass. It looked transparent almost. But all the communications and everything was all being held in the Shard. Well, since Faith and Kate, were able to get in there, since Faith was able to get in there and free her sister, they realized that it was probably too much trouble, and it was probably too, it was too exposed that the communications could all be in one place. So what they do is they moved it to a facility, and get this, it's a secret underwater facility. So it's under the ocean, it's completely out of reach, and this is kind of, because Mirror's Edge has always been about being above in the sky on the buildings. This would be pretty cool to actually delve into underground, going against kind of what Mirror's Edge is actually, known for. So you'd actually be going underground into this weird underwater facility where, like, no one, they actually built this as a precaution, all right? But it gets even more interesting. Now, hear this. Okay, the communications have been moved there from the Shard after the attacks from Faith. Faith then travels underwater and enters the facility. When she gets to the last stage, the last room where she needs to be, and enters the main, and when she enters, she spots what the public calls Big Brother. All right, now this is just a name, just, change the name, make it really cool. I don't know how to make a name sound as cool as, like, the Elusive Man, for instance, in Mass Effect 3. That's like a really cool name. I just called it Big Brother because it's kind of like, he knows everything that's going on, right? So the public calls him Big Brother, but no one's ever seen this guy in public before, all right? Now, get this. After a long conversation between, him and her, he reveals to Faith that he is her father. All right, so Big Brother, who's in charge of all the communications and everything that goes on to the city, he is actually the father of Faith. And for some of you might say, well, why wouldn't Faith recognize her own father? All right, now if you remember in the story, Faith ran away when she was like a little kid. I think she was like 15 or 16 or something like that. She ran away from home. She has not seen her father in 18, almost 20 years. All right, and a lot of things have changed. It just you wouldn't really recognize or even think that that would even be possible. And this is kind of a thing that I think Mirror's Edge never excelled upon, is that they told, okay, well, Fate's mother died during the riots, but what happened to Fate's father? And they never told what happened. So this is a good opportunity to really put him in a really engaging part of the story, and this is really going to nail that emotional impact. This is just really going to nail it spot on and make players. It's going to shock players, first of all, and it's going to shock the character as well. But the player is going to feel like they're actually going to feel attached to Faith like never before. All right. All right, Faith is astounded and more shocked than ever. The player now has a choice. There's two endings to the game. There's the good ending and there's the bad ending. Choice A and choice B, all right? Now, here's the good ending, all right? Destroy the facility, which will destroy all forms of communications and surveillance. So the police won't be able to talk. through the radios. There would be no security cameras. It basically sends out an EMP blast, and nothing works at all in terms of communication. But it will free the city and the people from control, all right? This method is the good ending, but in the process, because you're destroying the facility, it will kill Faith, all right? So, kind of like in Deus Ex, where that last choice, the fourth choice would be to destroy the facility that you're in, and basically it would be to kill Adam Jensen, but it wouldn't be like deciding what the future of it, what the future, you wouldn't be lying to the public, it'd be like, okay, it just something weird happened. And it was a very unclear ending in terms of, to the people in the city, but it was a very, it was one that was just, it felt like it was the right decision. But this would kill Faith, all right? And this is kind of, the way I wrote the story is that Mirror's Edge 2 would actually be the last game, all right? But it would kill Faith, it would kill everyone in the facility, but the whole people would be, everyone in the city would be set free, all right? And what's really cool about this is because when the people finally realize that, and Faith becomes a war hero, for instance, and people build a huge statue in her honor, and they all will never forget that she is the one who freed the city, and she becomes really a martyr, for instance. So. All right, and the second opinion, the second option, all right, is to, trying to find it here. Okay, the second option, join forces with her father, because, during this emotional impact, she doesn't really want to kill her father, You don't really want to do that, It's been kind of rough for her, and she's so shocked, so she actually joins forces with her father, all right? And, this will enforce more security and surveillance than ever before in the city. So now it's like complete control. You can't even move without anyone ever knowing it, all right? Doing so will force the people to fall back. So people that are actually in there in the fight, they'd have to fall back and being overwhelmed, all right? And the population of the city, due to all the death, all the violence, and just people just dying consistently, it would decrease to 25%. So a 25% decrease in population. That would just, it's not like that would be told, during the story. It's just like, it'd be like in a news broadcast, for instance. 25% of the population of the city has been completely eradicated. All right. And that's from death due to not following orders or still rebelling, during their, kind of overtake. So as for Faith, she is never seen again, and many think she was killed down in that facility. So you kind of get this unclear ending as to what happened with Faith. Now, that's kind of something I still don't like completely, is an unclear ending as to what happened to Faith, and that's something I want to kind of change, but I just don't know how to change, really. So that last ending right there, the ending where it says, what happened to Faith, I'm still not completely satisfied with what I wrote there, but that's just just an idea that I had, all right? So that's what I have for the story. That's how I think it should end and begin, all right? Those are just opinions I just wrote up. So now let's talk about multiplayer. Multiplayer is going to be a huge, huge, huge focus on this game, because with Mirror's Edge, all you had was a time trial stage. It didn't really have multiplayer. Now, not only are we going to have, you're going to return the time trial stages, but we're actually going to add a full-on open world, go wherever you want multiplayer. So you're going to actually have the whole city to explore with your friends, and there's going to be tons of collectibles to collect, and tons of bags, and stuff like that. But you're also going to be able to create and customize your own runner, male or female, race, gender, whatever. I already said gender, but clothes, voices and stuff like that. You're going to completely be able to customize your own runner, and when you're actually dropping to the multiplayer, you'll just see, like, off into the distance through the city, you'll see all these different players jumping from building to building using all these gadgets, and it's going to be a complete open world multiplayer. That would be cool, all right? Second of is we're going to have different multiplayer modes. What I'm thinking is a race mode, so basically start all the players at one point, and then they have to get to this point of the city, and it basically be a start to finish race, and whoever gets their first wins and whatnot. All right. Second of all is, like I said, the time trial stages. That, I'm sorry. Third of all, the time trial stages return. Fourth is what I'm thinking is what you gotta do is you have to improve the first-person shooting gameplay and stuff like that, because not like it was bad, but I think what you need to do for Mirror's Edge, well, almost knocked my book down. What you need to do for Mirror's Edge is you actually need to give Faith a gun, but at the same time, I know, and what I mean by that is why you should get rid of guns, because what the police have done is they completely took their weapons and they kind of created them so that they only the weapons only work with them. You know, it's kind of like if you're not part of the police, you know, if you're not part of the CPF or the Parendella Kruger organization, you can't operate a firearm. It just won't fire. It's kind of like what happened with Dark Sector. When you pick up a firearm and then that light would be blinking and it keeps on blinking, you can't use weapons very long because you know it's basically set to a person's DNA. Something like that would be really cool to implement for the CPF and the PK, because that would also add, it'd be a disadvantage, but if the player had a gun, you know, they would actually be able to, you know, fight their way through. So what I mean by that is, like, you know, the pistol that she's going to have is just, it's just a pistol that she got before they actually, you know, recalled all the weapons, actually made them the way that they're, you know, that they are. So that's what I mean by actual, like, giving herself a pistol. But, back to multiplayer, all right. First-person shooting, you know, a full-on team deathmatch option. Just implement that in there. Just put that in there. You know, just so people don't feel like it's a completely different new multiplayer experience. You know, that they can actually go back to this traditional first-person shooting that they're used to. All right. Capture the bag is one, and what I mean by that is you'd have like a bag, all right, and one person would grab the bag, but then another person has to chase down and basically tag that person. It'd be like a game of tag. So when you tag the person, you actually get the bag, and then you have to run it and get to the destination as fast as you can. All right, I think that would be pretty cool. I think trying to think what else. These are just ideas that I had before that. Those are 5 different game modes. You know, I think the main important one is going to be that open world explore multiplayer wise. I think that'll be pretty cool to be able to explore the whole world with your friends and whatnot. So, but yeah, that's what I have. That's what I had in mind. So, I guess that's it for this vlog. Before I go, I just want to mention, if you guys want to help out at all, if you guys really think I do have something, you know, what I said was really important and are actually good ideas, what I think you can do is you should try going to EA's forums or DICE's forums. More probably DICE's forums, since they're the ones who worked on the games. But try to go to DICE's forums and post a link to this video or something like that. I think that if we're able to tell them that this is a game that we, you know, really want, and this is a game that we really, when it comes out, you know, we really want it to be, you know, huge and have a huge production value and stuff like that, and just really, you know, just explode and just basically shock everyone's mind. You know, I think if by telling them, you know, ideas like this would be pretty cool, right? And I'm gonna say, I have to say this because I don't care about the cash or whatever. I don't care about copyright claims, whatever. All right. Industrial Gamer, do not care if DICE or EA companies use any of the ideas I just set forth in this video. All right, and that I don't care. I won't do anything to you guys. I won't start a huge lawsuit. I won't force you to make me a part of the development at all. You guys can do whatever you want with any of the ideas that I just set forth in this video. I don't care, all right? What I want most of all is a sequel to this game because I love the game so much. It's something that it's very memorable to me, and it's something I just don't want to be thrown under the rug and just left and forgotten about, all right? So that's it for the vlog. Try to post this on DICE's forums, or at least email them, or just let them know that, you know, just tell them, all right? just tell them. All right, that's it. That's it, guys. That's what I have. Let me know what you think about my ideas, if I have some really good points or not. And like I said, if you can help out, forums, email, Twitter posts, Facebook, whatever, you know, do what you think needs to be done. All right, guys? So thanks, and have a good day, and let me know what you think in the comments section. Bye.